So Lucy and Ellie, welcome to the Every Mind podcast. I don't think I've done an episode with two people, so this is the first. But no, welcome to you both, and really excited to have you here today. So, as always, I think it would be really good to kick things off with a little bit of an introduction from each of you. So, if you don't mind, we'll start with you, Ellie. If you can tell us a little bit about kind of what you do currently. We'll talk about the passion for mental health a little bit after that, but just give us the surface level version.
Oh yeah. Hi, so my name's Ellie. I work at Perlego and I am our commercial talent partner, and I also work across quite a lot of our people operations and partnering as well.
Amazing. How about you, Lucy?
I also work for Perlego, which, just a little bit of context, it's a global online learning library, and essentially we provide subscription models where students or professionals can access nearly 1 million books, all for kind of a monthly price. So what I do within Perlego is I'm Curation Manager. So I have the fun job of getting to go through the library every day and look at the books and try and promote authors and books and publishers. So super exciting.
That is cool. It's really cool. I didn't know that. And again, we reached out because we know that you're doing a lot of incredible work for mental health and wellbeing in the organization, and we wanted to kind of touch on that in today's podcast. So just hearing a little bit about kind of your strategy and your focus and some of the initiatives that you've run in the organization that's been successful. But also when we had our sort of brief chat, which we've already said seems like a long time ago, also sort of realized that we all have a strong passion for mental health. You know, I share very openly about my own experiences. As an organization, we're very focused on, you know, vulnerability and trying to open up the conversation of mental health. And I know that you kind of shared that you have a passion too. So I think it would be really good to start there as well. Again, if you don't mind sharing what you feel comfortable to share in terms of where your passion for mental health and well-being comes from. And again, sort of start with you, Ellie, if you don't mind.
Sure. I think a lot of it comes from kind of my own personal experiences with my mental health. I think I struggled quite a lot, particularly through like high school and my early 20s, with kind of anxiety and with also depression as well. So a lot of it comes from kind of wanting to help people who find themselves in that similar situation. But also, I mean, I'm just a massive people person anyway, so I love doing anything that kind of positively benefits the people that I am around or that I'm working with. So being able to be at Perlego and work with Lucy actually has been such a really wonderful experience, because she's so focused on how to improve the lives of people at Perlego and how to make space for people. It's been lovely. Sorry, Lucy, to give you a little shout out there, but it's true. So yeah, I think my passion it is very personally motivated, but having felt some of the things that I felt, I personally don't want other people to be in that situation or to feel like they're stuck in that situation if they have those thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you for sharing. And it's incredible, like you say. I think working in organizations, if you have people focused on people, it has massive impacts, and we'll talk about that later. But again, I think a lot of people that I speak to that have experiences like yours, you know, they know how it feels and they want to do more to help other people as well. So really appreciate you sharing there. How about you, Lucy?
So similar thing, really, obviously personal experiences, but for me, I guess my first kind of insight into mental health was through family, and then kind of understanding how watching someone improve. So my dad, for example, never really realized that he struggled with his mental health, and he was very angry when I was a child, when I was growing up, and just sort of very anxious about everything. And it really put a down on a lot of experiences that should have been really fun for us as a family, and that meant that we had a very difficult relationship when I was growing up. And then he went to the doctors, they put him on antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication, and it changed his life. He's like a completely different person now. And obviously the anxiety is still there, but he understands it a lot better. And watching the change that he went through, and then feeling that myself when I started taking medication to help with my anxiety, just really put it into perspective about how having mental health issues can change your behavior. And actually, like, a lot of people I think are misunderstood because they don't really understand what they're going through, or the perception that other people have of them means that they might not necessarily be resistant to help, but also people might not be willing to help them because they don't really understand what's going on. So all those experiences kind of really taught me that it's so important to talk about mental health and to raise awareness and to educate people, because there's so many of us in the world that are struggling with similar issues, and you feel so much less alone if you realize that actually it's not all that strange. It's actually quite a common thing, and talking about it can help you share sort of experiences and ways of coping, and that's kind of why I'm so passionate about raising awareness of mental health and ensuring that we have an open culture to discuss issues and strategies and support each other.
Yes, and again, thank you for sharing. And I think you touched on a really good point there in terms of we have to have the awareness and the understanding first before we kind of know what to do, if that makes sense. So, you know, everyone talked a lot about prevention and intervention, but actually awareness still plays a very pivotal part in that, because unless we understand what's going on or why we react in this way, like you say with your dad, you know, it's very difficult for us to even know what sort of treatment or what support we actually need at that time as well. If you don't mind, again, if we sort of keep on the personal route so far, and again, you know, come back to you, Ellie, like what, if you think about how open you potentially are now, like in the organization here already, sort of talking about your own experiences, you know, was you always like that? Or, you know, if you can talk about how difficult it might have been previously for you to talk, especially like you say in your early 20s, and really as well, was there like a turning point for you that made you a lot more open like you are today?
Yeah, for sure. I think as much as I try really hard to be an advocate for mental health and for the mental health things that we do in the company, I actually don't know that I would even say that I've actually been that open at Perlego here. I don't know that I could confidently walk into a room and say everyone here probably understands what I've suffered with, because I don't think that they do. So for me personally, I think there's probably a lot more that I could do, and a lot more that I could share. I think what I have really focused on is trying to make space for other people, and maybe fallen down a little bit on that sharing context, and you know, sharing why you should listen to me and chat with me, and really focused on giving people the space. In terms of maybe more of like outside of Perlego, I'm very open with my friends and with my family all the time. I think being able to share with people what's going on and why you're feeling the way that you do, and how, you know, sometimes everyone needs to, well, maybe not, but sometimes everyone needs to step away, right? And I find myself sometimes going into these little spirals where I don't want to talk to anyone for weeks on end, and being able to openly say to your friends, like, I'm really sorry, this is what I'm going through, has changed my relationships immensely. And it means that, you know, my friends actually feel like they're my friends and not like I'm just suddenly disappearing. And I think that change came for me probably quite recently, within the last 4 years or so. I don't think anything triggered it. I don't think there was an event that maybe led to that stage. I think I was reflecting a lot on myself and my low points, and how that affected me outside of just the way that I felt in my head, and how it affected those around me. And I realized that I could do so much better for those who want to support me that I don't let in. And yeah, like I say, it's completely revolutionized my relationships, all of them, my friends, my family, like romantic relationships. It's completely changed, because I
Amazing.
now do try actively to share and to be open, which I think really relates to what you were saying before, Lucy, that it is so important just to talk, and people can't help if you don't let them in, right?
100%. If you don't mind as well, before we go to Lucy, is, you know, because I think this is a really key part of what we're about to get to as well. What would you say the difference is between friends, family, personal life to you, and then work? Because, you know, we talk a lot about stigma outside of the workplace, society, friends, family, everything else, but you put that into the workplace and stigma becomes, you know, even harder to manage because of, I don't know, performance or judgment that we might feel. So what would you say is the most difficult part of potentially being more open in the workplace?
Yeah, I think the reason that people find it a lot more stigmatizing is because they do think it will reflect on their performance and on the way that they're perceived kind of in the company and the relationships that they can build. I think the reason that maybe I'm not that open is probably, or maybe I don't actively not be open, but the reason that maybe I have been less open than I could is to make space for other people, because I do I do want other people to feel like they can tell their story, and I don't want to just be me talking all the time. But I think as well, just by nature of the job that I do, I do get a little bit wary about it, because I don't want people to feel like, yeah, they can't come to me, or I worry about, I guess, that perception as well within my role, specifically as part of like a people and recruitment team, because there's quite a lot of pressure on it, and I don't want people to misconstrue that.
That makes sense. And again, I think that's a real challenge, isn't it, that a lot of us have when it comes to the advice of bring your whole self to work. You know, it's difficult because, you know, I definitely always say, you know, the way that I am with my team is very different to the way that I would be with my wife and therapists and everything else. I think, you know, vulnerability, there's so many different layers to it, and really appreciate you sharing. How about you, Lucy? Sort of what, you know, how difficult was it for you to potentially not feel like you can talk about it? And was there a turning point that allowed you to as well?
I can't really remember what I felt like before. I say before, I don't really know if I'm speaking of a specific time, but I remember kind of when I was really struggling in university, my university was really good at providing free counselling services. So there was a sort of fairly long wait list, but it actually wasn't anywhere near as bad as I've heard that the NHS ones are. So after sort of a few counselling sessions, I think that's when it really hit home that talking is so important, and not just because there's a professional who can give you advice, just because they're asking the right questions and actually giving you mechanisms that you can use to help yourself. So it's about enabling the person that's struggling to be able to continue to help themselves even if they're no longer going to therapy. And I think that for me made me realize that it's not even about someone being in a position to give you advice, because I, to this day, even as sort of a mental health advocate, don't necessarily feel qualified to give advice. But I think it's about, as you say, Ellie, making space for people and creating an environment that makes them feel comfortable sharing, and being able to relate to other people who have had similar or different experiences, and knowing that there's no consequence or no judgment for speaking out about things. And I think it's really interesting what you were saying about like it revolutionizing your relationships. And I think it all comes down to this idea of vulnerability, and actually like being authentic and genuine and vulnerable improves your relationships, because it helps other people relax around you, and it builds that trust that isn't necessarily there if you feel like you have to hide a part of yourself. And I think that's probably the difference between home and work, or social life and work, is that the workplace will always have some sort of trust barrier, because it's people that you don't necessarily choose to know, and also it's everything kind of comes down to performance and office politics, whereas it's slightly different in your social life. So I think that's probably the barrier that's then, is that you can try your best to create an environment where people feel safe and where people feel like there's a sense of trust. But I don't know whether we'll ever be able to make it perfect.
Yeah, no, for sure, that makes sense.
I do think, sorry, just to add a comment, I think actually something that maybe I feel like I do this, and maybe you also can resonate with it a little bit, Lucy, but as someone consciously trying to make space for other people, and also part and parcel of the role that I do, where I am, as a people person, like the support system for the company, I do consciously maybe try and hold back a little bit of that, so that other people can have their time. And so that, yeah, I was just kind of thinking as you spoke, like, I think thinking of myself as like someone who needs to be there to listen. I don't want to maybe show that weakness, because I don't want people to feel like they're a burden if they do choose to speak to me, or like that they'll be putting too much on my plate, even regardless of what I am feeling at the time. And I think that that's probably a position we've both put ourselves in, where we kind of take ourselves out of the equation a little bit.
Yeah,
which is good.
That's also really interesting from the perspective of giving space to voices that aren't always heard, because I think a lot of the time that we try and advocate and ask volunteers to talk about experiences, it's usually the same people, and it's usually the people that are already aware and already sort of passionate about mental health. And it's how do you break out of that cycle, because obviously you want to raise awareness, but it's always the same people talking about it. So how do you give space to the people that don't really feel comfortable or have never had an opportunity to talk about it without forcing people to. It's so difficult.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's really interesting, and I think we'll come on to that because it would be good to find out kind of, you know, as you've both highlighted your roles within the organization and how that's helping your colleagues. But I think the subject of vulnerability is a really, really interesting one because, you know, when I think about vulnerability in the workplace in particular, it comes back to like old advice that I was given of like, leave your personal stuff at home, don't bring it to work with you, right? So, you know, already, as you've said, there's like programming and barriers that exists in the workplace. But then I think the biggest conversation that, you know, I'm trying to have a little bit more in the sessions I deliver, especially sessions for senior managers, is vulnerability comes in many different forms. Like, you guys have been vulnerable talking about experiences of anxiety and you know, challenges that you've had in family dynamics and etc. That's a form of vulnerability. But I always say a form of vulnerability in the workplace is also saying, I don't know what that abbreviation means, or I've sent you this email and I shouldn't have sent this, I should have done it this way, and kind of like being vulnerable in that way. And it's like that huge spectrum. And whenever we get talking about it, and I say to people, you know, when was a time that you felt, you know, vulnerable? And vulnerable is that you made a mistake, or you was judged, or there was a feeling of shame. There's such a variety of different answers. And I think as you both highlighted, the workplace comes with barriers, and I think that's okay. You know, as a senior leader, as you know, someone myself, I don't feel like I need to disclose everything to my team. You know, there's a level of vulnerability that I want to share, but I also want to be in control of that, because as you've both highlighted, there's also a level of vulnerability that I want to show to my wife, to my therapist. And like, there's a lot more to me that I probably wouldn't even tell any of them, right? Yeah, because you've got to work through that yourself. So vulnerability, I think, is really important in the workplace. And I think people sometimes, you know, see that as, oh, I've got to tell everyone all of my deepest problems and cry all of the time. But actually it's not. There's layers to it, isn't there?
There's a duty of care as well. I think it's important, but also incredibly difficult to strike a balance between oversharing or perhaps burdening someone, or creating an environment where everything feels not doom and gloom, but there's a sort of a negative ethos. And and then the flip side of that being really defensive and closed off. And I think if you can kind of find a happy balance where people feel comfortable sharing, but also are aware of who they share it with and in what context, because obviously there's always triggers for people as well. So yeah, again, a very difficult balance to strike, but I think there's no harm in getting it wrong and then learning from it. And I think that's probably the main issue with why these conversations don't get started, because people are so worried about saying or doing the wrong thing and think that they're not qualified to have that conversation. But actually saying nothing is almost as bad as kind of condoning mental health. So I think it's, as with anything, with grief as well, a lot of people don't know what to say to someone who's just lost someone. But actually, if you say, I'm not very good at this, but how can I be there for you? You're giving that person the space and the freedom to ask for help if they need it, and to set the support on their own terms, because everyone is an individual at the end of the day.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think with all of this, you know, it'd be really good to know kind of what you're doing in the business, because a lot of people that will listen to this might be in HR or interested in kind of how can they improve mental health in their organization, in their workplace. So feel free, whoever wants to share. Can you give us a kind of an outline on maybe like what your focus is when it comes to mental health and well-being, maybe some of the initiatives, and is there anything that kind of like started it? Because, you know, every company's on a journey. Was there something that started it? And yeah, just give us like a top level approach to what you're doing in the business. I
think, Lucy, it would be great if you could share some of the things you started with for you, because I just think they're so amazing.
So I'll sort of give a bit of an outline about how it started, and I think Ellie would be a really great person to discuss the third-party company we use, because she's a massive advocate for that. So as with any kind of good intention, it had quite a sad beginning. A very valued and much loved member of the company in our early days, soon after I joined 2.5 years ago, ended up having to leave the company for mental health issues, and I think he ended up going to Japan for a bit and just spending some time completely disconnected from everything in order to understand sort of how he could get help, and it really hit a lot of people in the company hard, especially our CEO, and I think it kind of kickstarted this awareness of, we need to do something about this before it gets to the point where someone has to leave because they're so burnt out and overworked. So a few of us kind of realized that we're passionate about mental health, and we kind of clubbed together, and it evolved into our mental health squad, which is currently called FEWS. That's stands for Perlego Health and Emotional Wellbeing, and it has evolved over time, but it essentially grew out of a general desire within Perlego to prioritize employee health and well-being, and we figured that it would serve two roles essentially. So one of them being providing psychological and emotional support and resources for individuals who need them, and then the other side being nourishing our team culture and social relationships with each other, with the aim of just increasing general happiness and well-being at work. So then we kind of split off. We've now got a social committee, which kind of changes on a quarterly basis, and then we've got the mental health squad, which people can join or leave as and when they feel comfortable. So Ellie, do you want to sort of chat about how Spill came about?
Yeah, well, actually, so Spill was in place when I joined, but Spill has been I think is one of the best tools out there / that we have at Perlego for our employees and for their mental health. Spill is a service that provides essentially counseling and therapy services to employees, and so they can sign up for a one-off session, or they can sign up for a course of sessions over, I think it's 6 weeks, isn't it, Lucy? Depending on what they need, and they can sign up as and when, and whenever they need, and the company kind of pays on a size of the company basis. And I think having access to Spill has been amazing for so many people, because I think therapy is one of those things that no one realizes they need until they need it, or until they have it. Sorry. I think having access to that as a tool that they can access whenever and on, their own time and their own space from the comfort of their own home has been really, really helpful. It's all video services, so they don't have to go in anywhere, and there's no cost to them, which I think is a huge barrier for a lot of people beginning therapy. And we get such good feedback on it. I've used Spill a lot, and it's great. The people that they have there are just so wonderful and easy to talk to, and it's amazing. I cannot sell Spill enough. To anyone listening, get Spill.
No, it's really good to hear. And I think what we tend to see with organizations is a lot of them go straight down the therapy route. Old school ways, and still a lot of organizations do this traditional ways, is employee assistance programs, like call this hotline or book 6 counseling sessions, and they just throw it down people's throats, and then they don't know why people are not using it. And it's the same with, I'm sure, Spill or coaching, all of this stuff that I'm a big advocate for, you're a big advocate for. But businesses implement it and they expect magic to happen. But I think what you guys have done well is you've also got the network of employees that are also driving the conversation and allowing people to see that Spill is actually a really good tool to use, because like you just said, everyone needs therapy. Therapy is fine. Let's go and speak to people. And I think that's where potentially there's a really good balance. As an organization, we definitely focus more on that stigma part of strategy, because we always say, without tackling stigma, you're not going to get the engagement of the initiatives that you're launching anyway. So have you seen that to be the case as well? When you combine the two, you've seen engagement rise for Spill, but also more and more conversations through the network that you've created as well.
Yeah. So the desire behind launching Spill was because we looked into getting mental health training for the FEWS squad, and it is very expensive, but also I think a lot of us felt that it would be nice to have a third party who were objective and who weren't anything to do with work, because what we assumed was that a lot of people would feel more comfortable having a conversation outside of work and being able to take that into their own hands, which is what Spill allows. It it's integrated into Slack, but it's very much on your own terms. Nobody knows you're doing it. So we went down that route just to kind of see how it would pan out, and it worked wonderfully. But we were keen to balance that with emphasis on building a culture of wellbeing and as you say, destigmatizing mental health, because without the culture of openness and awareness within the company, like as you said, like people don't really understand why therapy is important, why it's useful, and also wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable talking about it. And it's great that Spill is private, but we didn't want to make people feel like they couldn't talk about mental health just because Spill was a third party. So it's about balancing the two and creating an internal culture as well as outsourcing the support that we didn't necessarily feel qualified to give.
Yeah, I think it's so important as well, because like what your role is, and we train like champions, and you know, we do a lot of work with managers, and as you have already highlighted, we always say you have to know where your responsibility ends and you have to set boundaries. So if I'm a champion and I can share my story, which I do, I'm always then signposting. It's always then that there has to be a time where you signpost to a professional or someone that can help, which is where, again, like Spill or something like that would then come in too. So no, I think it's a really, really good thing. And what kind of, you know, impact have you seen in the organization? Have you seen, like, it's always hard to track, right? Is there more of an open culture? Is there more conversations happening?
I think it's not something I would say we have like hard and fast data on. I know that we do have, and I'll let Lucy talk about, we do have a survey which we do for mental health, and to kind of gauge how people are feeling within the company and what we could be doing better, or what people want more of. But I think one thing that's been really noticeable since I joined has been people's willingness to get involved with things. We recently had, through Mental Health Awareness Week, we held an event called a Tea and Talk,
Nice.
and we did a kind of a traffic light theme. So everyone was invited to this tea and talk, and we had cakes and tea, obviously. But we provided stickers, so people could put a little sticker on their cup as to green, like, yes, I'm really open to having a conversation around mental health. Orange, like, maybe if you bring it up with me, it'll be okay, but I'm not going to instigate it. And red is, please don't talk to me about mental health. And we had a little traffic light kind of half hour, which was really nice. And so many people got involved, which I think before maybe people would have just been scared, not necessarily scared off, but I think people would have been more hesitant about anything that was kind of billed as like a mental health event. And I think, the openness around that was really wonderful. And there were some really nice conversations that were had during the day as well. So I think those kind of soft touch things that we do have been really impactful. And it does also give us a chance to remind people what other resources are available. But yeah.
The survey, we did one last year during Mental Health Awareness Week, and it was designed to kind of gauge how people are feeling, but also to get feedback about how we can improve our mental health initiatives within the company. And obviously we didn't get kind of like everyone filling it out, but out of sort of 25 complete responses, we kind of looked at the feedback, the quantitative and qualitative feedback that was provided, and I kind of like color coded what people were mentioning in their responses, and there was 16 out of 25 people specifically mentioned work or the workplace as being like an area they found sort of challenging when it comes to their mental health and well-being. And I don't think it was specifically about our company, but it just went to show that how many, like, mental health isn't necessarily something that's talked about in the workplace, but it's so central to work because, like, we're stressed, we're under pressure, we're constantly being expected to perform our best, and like the amount of people that talked about it. So it just really highlighted for us the importance of the work that we're doing. But then on the flip side of that, like some of the open-ended questions we asked, people were talking a lot about the fact that they felt like they couldn't be totally honest about mental health issues or concerns at work, and even if they were speaking to their peers about it, they weren't speaking to their managers about it. And one of the final questions we asked was like, we asked people to rank in order what they would like us to work on next, and something that came up really high was manager awareness training. So again, it's that, like, breaking down the boundaries of who you feel comfortable talking to and having a safe space, but also we realized that we had to separate conversations of performance from conversations of development and personal growth. And that's actually something that the people team have really worked on this year, and especially over the last 6 months. It's really great to see how the mental health initiatives can actually have a like concrete impact, a material impact on the sort of the functioning of the company.
Yeah, so true. And I love the fact that you're splitting up the performance element with the mental health element, because like I tend to see it happen where managers are like, okay, I need to ask them how they're feeling. I'm going to do it as part of this performance review. And it doesn't take, you know, anyone for a second to realize there is zero intent with you actually asking me how I'm feeling right now. Like, this is a question that you've been told to ask me as part of this check-in. Whereas, like you've said, if managers have some, and they don't have to have extensive training, like as long as they've got some basic awareness, basic understanding, and they have some empathy, some vulnerability, and, you know, those questions then just start happening more naturally in conversations. And is that why you've tried to split them up, because you don't want it to look forced?
I'm actually so proud of what we've done with our feedback and performance reviews, so I'm going to tell you all about it. Yeah, so we've completely, as Lucy said, split out kind of feedback sessions and performance conversations, and we have also done a whole set of kind of light touch and more intensive manager training as well. So performance is now done twice a year, and it's kind of done as a career review. We all know that that is the subject of the conversation, and we're all kind of really well prepped for those conversations. And then we also have twice a year, completely separately, like a 360 feedback review, where we give people the space to get like a full, really well-rounded picture of their growth and their development from their peers and their managers and their direct reports. And all of that is, as I say, completely delinked from their performance. And in those conversations, that's where we're more likely to kind of talk about their mental health and things like that. And I think those are the areas that people feel a little bit more like they can share freely. But also alongside the feedback side of things, we've done a lot of training on how to properly give feedback, because that can be quite an anxiety inducing thing for people, especially more junior people in a company who don't want to give feedback to their manager and are really worried about that kind of the power imbalance there. So we've done a whole lot of training about how to give and receive feedback, the intent that comes with feedback, and all of that as well. So I can go on about this for hours, but that's been really, really positive, I think, for people's, like the way that people understand not their place in the company, but so that people can have a really good understanding and be really well prepared for whatever conversation they're having. And then we've also tried to encourage our managers to have more ad hoc conversations around mental health and well-being, and to not bring them up in any performance related conversation. It should always come up in kind of like a weekly one-to-one or a check-in. We've got sort of light touch, self-service, what would you call it? We created like basically little self-service training things that they can go through for like how to manage with empathy and how to discuss mental health with your direct report without it being like you don't have to be prepared to take on everything that they're feeling or everything, but you should be aware of what they're feeling so that it doesn't come as a surprise. So we've done a lot of things around that as well, which I think has been really helpful for direct reports, but also really helpful as a manager to feel like you are more equipped to have that conversation, because there's two sides of it, right? There's someone who's being asked in a performance review, how's your mental health? And there's someone who's really nervous about asking the person that they're working with how they're feeling, and who maybe doesn't feel like they're equipped to have a conversation and doesn't want to do any damage, but doesn't know how to approach it. So I think that's been something we've really tried to focus on over the last, probably 6 to 9 months. It's been a huge thing for Perlego.
No, it's really cool. And I think it's really interesting and a really important lesson for people listening is, you know, as we're starting to peel back the layers, there's so much more that you're doing than just a tea and talk once a year, or launching Spill, or, you know, someone sharing their personal story. You know, you're now diving deeper into like the way managers are managing and performance reviews and feedback and everything else, which is what a lot of people forget when it comes to mental health and wellbeing in organizations, I feel. If you don't mind, because I know we spoke about this a little bit when we caught up beforehand, like personal experience, I think we all agreed that it's a really important part of tackling stigma and culture. So, firstly, how important has personal experience and getting people to share openly been within the organization? And then secondly, I would say, has there been any downsides? Like you've already mentioned, like triggers and, boundaries, etc. How can an organization get people sharing personally, but do it in the right way?
So I'm going to touch on something that is very close to my heart. And I think it was for World Mental Health Day, that I believe was in October last year. We decided to set up a panel discussion with volunteers from within the company, and then a guest speaker who, from our understanding, was doing some mental health advocacy within the business world. And he was actually, I think, the ex-CEO and founder of Monzo, and it was in the news that he'd stepped down as CEO because of burnout and sort of anxiety. And so we thought that would be, number one, a way to really engage people to come and watch the panel, but also to get an external insight as well, as kind of like the internal company perspectives. And it was just incredible. Like I can't really express how sort of heartfelt it was, but we did a bit of an outreach to get the volunteers, and again it tended to be people that were kind of already a little bit open about mental health or already part of the squad, but I tried my best to give people that don't usually get a chance to speak a platform, and I sort of mediated the discussion, and we had a few pre-agreed questions, and I knew that who specifically to direct them to, but it ended up flowing very naturally. And I think once one person kind of opened up about their experiences, everyone else felt comfortable doing it, and the feedback we got afterwards was just phenomenal. Everyone was sort of obviously saying thank you, and that they really appreciated that people were so genuine and really let their guards down. And I think that was probably one of the defining moments in kind of the openness within the company. I think since then I've definitely seen more of a willingness to share, and to kind of people really looking out for each other. So that was, for me, kind of one of the best things that we've done. The flip side of that being, as I was saying to Ellie earlier, I was so invested in it that I ended up getting pretty stressed trying to organize it, because I wanted it to go well. And I guess that's the downside of caring a lot and trying to implement these initiatives in a culture that, by nature of it being a workplace, is a little bit resistant to sort of mental health and those kind of discussions. So I think you do have to be a little bit careful about looking out for yourself, and ensuring that you're not giving too much in order to help others. And obviously you want to help others, but if it's at the detriment to yourself, then you're not actually taking your own advice, and you need to be setting a good example. If you're encouraging people to have better work-life balance, and then you're sitting at your laptop at 9 o'clock, then it just looks like lip service. So like you were saying, Paul, it's about knowing when to stop and when to pass that on to the professionals.
Yeah, it's a really good thing to hear. Ellie, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would agree with Lucy. I think that was definitely a huge turning point within kind of the company as a whole. And I think one of the great things about having quite a senior and influential guest speaker was that it really resonated, obviously, with kind of maybe more of the senior leadership in the company, who probably don't have that much time to invest or to think about these things. But it also really helped that we did have at least one quite senior member of our own team open up and be very vulnerable with us as well. And I think it's amazing to have anyone in the company trying to create the space for these conversations, but obviously having people who have more of that like perceived power really advocating for this and making space for it, it really does I think lend itself to more openness across the whole company. Like there is definitely like now much more of a vibe that it's okay to talk about these things. And I think that was a really nice part of it as well.
Yeah, I love that. There's so much there as well, because like panels work really well because, as you said there, I mean, I've been on panels before where you can get an external speaker to come in and, they tell their story every day of the week, right? And they're external to the business. So they're going to have an impact. But if you've then got them alongside your fellow colleagues,
Mm.
it's incredible, like the impact. And I always sort of not downplay what I do, but I say, put me on a panel with some of your colleagues and it will be incredible, because they'll be listening to someone and think, I didn't know they experienced that. I didn't know they went through that. And as you said, it's just facilitating that conversation, whether it's, you know, in that case, the ex-CEO of Monzo, like sharing vulnerably first, you know, you facilitating it, engaging in those conversations. It's incredible. But I also think a lot of people struggle with engagement on webinars and sessions like that. And what you've just said in terms of like having senior people on there is so important, because firstly, like we had one of our clients that started to really sort of make sure managers were saying, look, just spend an hour of your day, please, to just join this webinar and encourage your team to join it. And if you're a manager who manages 15 people, 10 people, and I say, guys, look, I'm having this hour out to like join this webinar, I think you should too as well, then they do. But if I'm a manager and I'm not even joining it and I'm staying busy, then everyone else kind of does that as well. So they saw this huge rise in engagement of sessions when they really sort of challenged their managers and senior leaders to take an hour out of their day to attend these sessions. So I think there's, as you say, sometimes we overcomplicate this stuff. And it's incredible to hear what you're doing.
End of the day. And I think it goes back to what I was saying about trying to encourage people that aren't seen as kind of a champion for mental health to talk about mental health, because if the same people are talking about it all the time, people might get to the point where they're kind of rolling their eyes like, yeah, like we get it, you support mental health. Whereas actually, if your CEO, and our CEO is very good at reiterating that Spill's there and we want you to get therapy on the company's, like, sort of as a thanks from the company, or very good at making sure that he's being seen to support mental health initiatives. So it's about leading by example, and also ensuring that it's not the same people that are kind of promoting these discussions.
For sure. I'm conscious of time, and this normally lasts half an hour, but we've been talking because I could talk for more and more. 2 more questions, if you don't mind, which I'll direct to both of you. Firstly, start with you, Ellie. What do you hope to see in the future of workplace mental health? Like, what would you like to see?
That's a great question. I think what I would love to see is the continuation of kind of those barriers coming down. I think as you said before, like there always will be a level of sort of lessened vulnerability, shall we say, within the workplace because of the nature of where you are, and also because we do want to save more for the people we love outside of work. But I would love to see more of that kind of destigmatization. I think as well, flexibility and continued flexibility of working really, I hope, will continue forever, because I think it's an amazing way for people to be able to continue to be productive without feeling that they're like obligated to be somewhere and without putting themselves under that pressure. And it also, it just gives people the space to kind of operate as they need to when they are maybe suffering more. So those are things that I really, really hope to see. I think, within Perlego specifically, there's a few things I can't talk about right now because they're literally being announced on Monday. But there's a few things that we are trying to do more of. And, you know, we recently trialed an amazing coaching service. And I think that's a really great way to give people more of a professional, shall we say, like a more of a professional place to grow and to develop and to remove some of the anxieties and stresses that they might be feeling without them going to therapy as well. So there's heaps. So much I want, but flexibility and destigmatization are my big ones.
Nice. I like that. How about you, Lucy?
So in very similar to what Ellie was saying about flexibility and it giving people the space to work according to their needs and their schedule. I think normalizing taking mental health days would be incredible to see. We have like a quota of sick days we're allowed to take per year, but what happens when you're having a really bad day in terms of your mental health? What happens if you've just lost someone, or actually your anxiety's through the roof? And just because it's not a physical ailment doesn't mean that we still don't need to take space and time for ourselves. So I think having something in company policy or something in law that states that mental health days count as sick days, I think that would be sort of groundbreaking, really.
I love that. Really good stuff. I'm going to ask you one more question, one final question, and I haven't prepped you for this, so I apologize. But if possible, we call this the just one thing concept. Can you please share one piece of advice that you was given in the past that has resonated the most with you? So a piece of advice that's kind of stuck with you the most. I'm not going to ask. Whoever wants to jump in first, whoever's got it, feel free to step in.
Does it have to be to do with mental health?
No, anything.
This is really difficult.
It is difficult. It is difficult.
I think probably that you are your own worst enemy. I have insanely high expectations of myself, and actually that's not what other people, it's not reflective of the expectations that other people have of me. So probably talking is important in terms of like obviously sharing experiences, but actually to understand what how your perception of yourself is different or similar to how other people perceive you, really helps you get out of your own headspace, which can get quite dangerous. Obviously, if you're in a sort of circular thought pattern and you're kind of spiraling, it's really helpful to get an external perspective and someone to say like, this isn't a big deal. It might feel like it is at the time, but like take some reflective time, take some space, and wake up tomorrow and it might not seem so bad. So I think, yeah, like you are your own worst enemy, and also like be open to discussing and accepting alternative perspectives.
I like that one.
Lucy.
Yeah. How about you, Ellie?
It's a tough act to follow. Someone once said to me, and it sounds a little bit, someone once said to me, don't bend until you break. And I think that has been something that has really stuck with me, because I'm naturally very much I'm a compromiser, and I will always bend first and I will always compromise first. Whether it's a friendship or at work or in a relationship, I'll always be the one to kind of try and make the space for someone. And I think that has been very helpful for me to remember, because I need to create boundaries, and boundaries aren't a bad thing. And having boundaries means that our relationships can be stronger and better, and I can be stronger and better as well. And that has really stuck with me for a while now.
Actually. And also I think it really relates to the whole thing about burnout, that people get to a point where they're so far gone because they don't realize that they're burning out. So it's it's about kind of like, and they said the same thing with therapy as well. Don't leave getting therapy to the point where it's so bad that you need therapy. Get it as like a general sort of checkup. That's really like fascinating.
That's really good advice. I think, like you say, both of them are quite similar, aren't they? It's like, making sure we set boundaries, focus on ourselves a little bit more. We always put other people's expectations in front of our own. I always kind of say in some of the sessions that I deliver, that it's funny how me spending some time on my own mental health, whether it's going for a walk or a run or journaling or going to therapy, whatever it is, I feel guilty and selfish because I should be spending time with my family. I should be working. I should be doing this, right? And all of those feelings happen, and I prioritize everyone else in front of my own self. But actually, as I also sit here, however drastic this sounds, the biggest threat to me is me, because I'm a man of under 45 years old. The biggest killer of men under 45 is suicide, right? So it doesn't really add up. And it shows you how, as you say, the lack of education that we've had and the lack of awareness of how important we actually are to focus on our mental health, we lack that. We don't prioritize it enough. So I think that's a really good sort of, that your advice there is really good to, especially with a lot of HR professionals that probably listen to this. They put a lot of stuff in front of their own selves.
Yeah, I think what you were saying about feeling guilty for spending the time working on yourself, I think it's such a damaging misconception, because actually the more that we're able to mend ourselves and to focus on ourselves, we're in a better position to be there to help others and to actually give our genuine full selves and our full energy to the people we love. So actually it's a selfless act to work on yourself before you're able to be there for someone else.
Amazing. I love that. Just finally, guys, where's the best place if people want to connect with you? Are you both on LinkedIn? You are, aren't you? Is that the best place?
Yes,
we're both on LinkedIn.
So do you want us to we can send over an email.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes and stuff like that. But no, I just wanted to say thank you so much for your openness and your honesty in today's episode, but also as well, I think there's a lot of really good advice that people can take away from this, like little practical things, whether it's a tea and talk or looking at a network that you can create, personal experience, a panel. There's lots that you've gone through. So from me and the Every Mind at Work team, thank you so much for your time, and it's been great to chat today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for having us. Sorry, Lucy.
No worries. Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.